in the town of Lancaster. Honora Street, that was a 3-phase project in excess of $6.5 million. Harris Hill, we did the intersections. We now have to move on to some of the drive lanes. The average road score, and I should probably caveat that, the road scoring, we don't do the road scoring. So we have the Greater Buffalo Niagara Region Traffic Council, who is our metropolitan planning organization. It's a mouthful. I know, I can spit out acronyms, but I figure give you the definition. But the MTO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, that's our conduit, that we have a seat at the table along with New York State DOT, New York State Thruway, the City of Buffalo, and Niagara County. And in the region between Erie and Niagara County, we're over 1 million people, trying to bring in as much of that capital, federal capital that we can. So projects are always vetted through there. In Planning Council, New York State has a vision of preservation. Well, New York State has in excess of probably 450 employees and 200 plow trucks for Erie County and Niagara County. Erie County Department of Public Works, we have about 160 employees and about 45 to 50 plow trucks. Two vastly different philosophies on how we manage our assets versus how they do theirs. They have about 600 miles of road for all 8 western New York counties. They're in pavement preservation. So they have the ability to have a bigger budget. The money goes for them first. We have this massive infrastructure and smaller budget and smaller workforce to maintain that infrastructure. There are challenges that we have. There's, always looking for new, fresh ideas and different approaches. What worked yesterday may not work till tomorrow. So with the MTO, though, that's where our federal aid projects come in. And on the federal aid side, it's a 4-year period. So, like I said before, the FAST Act, which was $58 billion from fiscal year 2016 to 2020, that runs out this September. The William Street Corridor is something that we've been looking at. It wasn't in the last one, but it's been studied. We've done a lot of modeling with the MTO, or the MPO, excuse me. And by New York State standards, in current traffic counts, it's right on the border of making it a multi-lane highway. We know, I personally drove it. When I cut my teeth coming into the county government in 2008, one of my first projects was here on Central Avenue. I know probably 10,500 cars a day on that road, and probably seen each and every one of them that we impacted that day. The William Street Corridor, we're in excess of 15,000 cars a day. And it drops off sharply after you head east of Bowen. It's about half of that, 7,000 cars a day. So what we've done is we've got that on the map. The MPO is going to put that through for a project on the next TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program. And the federal government's going to do design analysis with us. We have a unique situation on that section. Most of our roads are considered a 4-rod road where we have 66 feet of right-of-way. From Transit to Aurora Street, we only have 48.5 feet right-of-way. What we want to do is construct a usable road within that 48.5 feet of right-of-way. It's going to be a large undertaking because we're going to have to engineer some products that typically we don't put underneath the road. Drainage being one of them. We see broken ditches. It's always an issue if there's emergency responding vehicles, the queuing of traffic, trying to move over. So somewhere in a 2 to 3 lane type configuration, we don't know what that'll be. That'll be derived from the federal study. But we think that program too, to develop a reconstruction of William Street from Transit all the way to Schwartz, actually. We're looking at the whole corridor when we look at the traffic counts all the way from Union Road out to Schwartz Road. But the reconstruction would be within Transit to Aurora and further on take it to Bowen. This year we still have some more big projects coming. Bowen Road's one of them, going from Clinton Street up to Broadway. Fortunately, the northern half of Broadway, we're just going to do a surface, a minor mill and fill there as opposed to what we're doing from Clinton to the bridge just north of William Street. And that project we're hoping can kick off before school starts the end of August here. And then Pleasant View is another road that we had on our list for last year. There was some shifts that we had to make in the schedule, so we're going to do that this year and go from Transit to Stony, and then hopefully next year continue on from Stony up to Haven. With that, if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to take some.
Ron Murphy, Councilman. I'm glad you mentioned
Ron.
the road. Can we-
Microphone.
Can you go to the microphone, please?
Hi, Bill, thanks. Ron Murphy, I'm just looking council member. I'm glad you mentioned the thing about the roads being used, like transit road not being used so much, and they're using cut roads to get through. So that includes semis. So we
Right.
talk about Pleasant View and Harris Hill. Right now, I work with John, basically to get some signage out on Harris Hill. We just sponsored a resolution one day and it passed to go to the county for signs. My question to you is, and again, we want, you're going to be paid for Pleasant View. We want to protect our investments. That's an investment that we're making, the county's making in our town. But by having these trucks coming through, it's deteriorating the roads. So why can't we protect our investments by doing proper signage? My question is, why is it so difficult to get the signs, the process?
Right, those are great questions, and it's faced by a lot of communities. County roads are constructed and generally to move commerce. We connect towns and villages. Town roads are usually within the town. State roads connect counties together. It'd be great if everything worked that great as it does in theory. The process there is we have to establish truck routes then, which in a home rule state like New York State, the lowest level of government has the biggest power. So the resolution, like you said, is passed. If the town were to say you want to designate a certain avenue or certain roadways that are truck routes, then we could go through and post it that way. We're dealing with this up in Acton, Newstead also with Perry's Ice Cream. And the village and the town boards had to get together, look at what's the most sensible truck route, because truthfully, unless you're on the interstate, almost every road has some sort of house or business on it, and then we get into some of the federal jargon where what signage we can put up and what's acceptable without losing that federal aid as well. But those are the processes when we have 3 layers of government in New York State. And truthfully, everything used to be here at the local level at Region 5 with DOT. So a Class A community, a town with excess of 50,000 people, used to be able to make all your own decisions, and that included on town roads or county roads with speed limits and things of that nature. Now everything has to go off to Albany, and there's a lot of wasted time in there. We'd love to bring it back. It's one of the things we've been advocating for, is for our regions to have more of a voice, and we know better how to plan than somebody sitting in Albany telling us how to plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You want to form a line?
Hi, Jeffrey David Capello, resident of Lancaster. First, thank you for extending us the courtesy of your time. My question centers around financial sustainability of the investments in infrastructure. There we go. Sorry. Given the current environment of financial scarcity that's underwritten by the rising non-military public consumption due to an aging population and a reduction in tax rates as companies leave New York State, what strategies do you envision being used for having utility and maintaining the financial sustainability of those investments in infrastructure?
No, that's a great question. And part of when I was talking about the Consolidated Highway Improvement Program, there's a lexicon that's in Albany is how that's figured out, but one of those things comes back to registered vehicles. We know that the registration of vehicles is also dropping in this generation. It's off by almost 15%. Going forward, the gas tax that was developed in the 50s, it's not sustainable. We need to look at other things. Back in the 90s, there was an Excel commission that was looked at, and that was a cross between the county, local businesses, the state legislature, and private industry. How can we come up with some sort of sustainable funding plan, and what's that going to take? Because this morning I had the pleasure of speaking at UB on an autonomous vehicle conference, and one of the biggest things we discussed.
I was there, by the way, Dr. Murray, so shame. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, so that's the other side of it. As EV vehicles, electric vehicles come on board, that's less fuel. So gas tax again dropping, miles per gallon is going up. So the gas tax solution is not there. Fossil fuels are always going to be around. We need to come up with other strategies. If it's user-based, we don't need another tax. We need to look at within how we can make this work. Public-private partnerships have been, that seems to be the vogue phrase, but let's skin the peel the banana back and see what it's really going to prevail. I don't have a good answer on how the sustainability of infrastructure investment is, other than we need to have another revival period like we did in the 50s and 60s. And it's not just roads and bridges, we see it all over with water distribution, sanitary sewers, and no one wants to talk about the fifth utility, and that's data and Wi-Fi. So everybody's dependent upon that. So how do we get that, especially into our rural outreaches?
Would it be accurate to say you're trying to leverage technological and organizational efficiency to offset the gap between revenue and outlay?
Absolutely. We're trying to do that right now with our personnel. We know the highway department prior to 05, 06, we had over 450 employees. So I'm at about 150, 160 now. There is technology out there, different program software. We're trying to, everybody's wearing multiple hats, but we're also trying to be as efficient as possible.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll say hello to your cousin who lives right next door to me when I come home tonight.
Excellent.
Okay. I want to thank you for the work that you did on that 0.3 of a mile on Lake Avenue this year. That was a beautiful job, so thank you very much. It warms my heart to hear you talking about William Street, because it is in horrible condition. We have a fire hall on William Street. As you know, we have some drainage pipes that are covered on William Street, yet there are a number of open ditches. When there is a fire call, and we have on an average of 2 calls a day from our Twin District Fire Hall, you are hard pressed to move over enough so that a fire truck or any emergency vehicles can get past. It's very narrow. I guess I'd like to know what work you think you will do. And you had said from Transit to Aurora, and of course, Twin District Fire Hall is actually between Aurora and Lake Avenue. So, so that's critical for public safety also. But just what is it that you feel that you can do on that stretch on William Street? What is your goal?
Our goal is to make that an efficient and safe route, to handle the volume of traffic. We also understand, there's been a few other housing developments approved off of Bowen, so it's going to add to some of that. So we're not using the current traffic counts. When we do the modeling, we're expecting other growth, what we're seeing. And what will happen, there's various designs that can happen on that road. We'd love to see if we have 48 feet to work with. And this is where we're going to be challenged as engineers, but it's not impossible. What we would need to do is those ditches would be enclosed. We have to use materials, maybe back to concrete pipes, that can support the interstate with the truck traffic as well as vehicle traffic, but also have walkable areas, have shoulders outside of the driveway, and then also have a center turn lane. So if we just used the typical width of what a lane would be, could be between, the travel lane would be between 11 and 12 feet in either direction, and then a center turn lane of 11 feet, and then still have room for a shoulder and for the stormwater to run off and go places. And that'll stay within the corridor limits that we have right now.
There really isn't a turn lane going onto Lake Avenue from William Street.
Right.
And anyone, and I am the person who would be heading east and wishing to make a left-hand turn onto Lake Avenue, that backs up traffic horribly. And as you said, we have a lot of volume of traffic on William Street. So, so I'm glad to hear that is in your sights.
Yeah, that's it. In our capital projects that we just went through yesterday, that's one of the projects that's in there for the 80-20, 80% will come from the federal government.
But that's just design.
Design.
Oh, I realize that, but
That's what I wanted to notice, just design. The problem we have, and we've talked this internally, and we've talked it over with legislators, is the width of the road is so narrow.
I know it is.
And you look at what's right next to the road on the side that's heading west, it's all utility poles. And the front yards of the people. And if you go on the other side, the south side, or the side that's heading east, it's the front yards of the people. So to expand it to what people are asking for, which is the equivalent of like 2 lanes heading east and west, I don't think we can do just because there's no room there unless we were to take houses. And to give you an idea on the cost, we're spending What's a 1 mile on a mill and overlay now? 500,000. That's a lot for just a mill and overlay. But we had projected on doing all of, East and West Road in West Seneca? You know where it is? We projected on going from Lydecker to the end, which is Orchard Park Road, doing it this year. The cost bids came in so high, we can only do half of it. So we had $3 million set aside for reconstruction this past year for the whole road, which is only basically going to do half, and then we got about another $3 million for next year. So $6 million to do what's really not a really long road, East and West Road, for a complete reconstruction. And that's if we were to build a 2-lane both way and redo the sewers, because that's what's going on in East and West Road, is we're also doing that. We're talking about $6 million. And so if we don't get ability from the federal government to pay for that, it's going to be very difficult to do, not impossible. But the problem is, even if we got the money, we have to make a decision, what are we going to do with the houses? Because we've looked at it internally, is there a way to put a passing lane in? I'm not certain, I'm not an engineer, I'm going to leave it up to them. But if you have to expand the road, what then happens to the people's property on both sides of the road? Because if you expand the road, even if you move the ditches out and now they're underground, you're still going to have to take some of their property, including potentially having to remove the utility poles and then put them back in, which is a cost. So that's all the stuff that's being considered now. And so we have money that's going into the 2020 budget for the design cost, which we're paying, and then submitting, after looking at the various designs, we'll be submitting that, as Bill noted, to the federal government for looking what can be done long term. So I don't want to leave the impression from people that William Street is getting done next year. The design work is going to be done next year. And then the determination of what can be done will be done probably by the end of next year, so that we can figure out what's going to happen going forward. I didn't want, because I think there was maybe an impression that work was being done.
I don't have that impression.
Good, I'm
I
glad.
think,
Hope nobody else did.
I think just knowing that you are considering going into design is a really good start. But let me ask you this, are you talking 2 lanes in both directions, a 4-lane highway? Because in my estimation, that isn't going to work, because you're talking about the private property. And unless you're going to take property from the homeowners,
We don't
I
want to do
can't
that.
see that there's any way
We
you're going to do
can't.
it. But 2 decent lanes had 1 lane in each direction. Right now, it's like driving on a washboard. It's horrible. I drive it every day.
And
It's horrible.
And I didn't grow up in Lancaster, but I spent a lot of time in Lancaster because my grandparents were from Lancaster. My mother graduated from Lancaster High. She knew you were having her.
Did you? Okay.
Mike, I think you're wrong. I won't ask the age.
Yeah.
Not a good idea. I think you graduated around the same time.
Okay.
So I spent a lot of time here, and I remember where William Street used to be before the subdivisions were built in. It was just it was a road to basically
It
go
was the
through a rural
country.
section.
Right.
And that's part of the problem we have in county government. We're part of what's called One Region Forward, which is a goal to try to eliminate sprawl, to invest in your infrastructure where the people are, and to avoid constantly going further out. And what we're seeing now, especially in this area, is now developers are looking, we got to move, people who moved to Lancaster because they liked their semi-suburban but peace and quiet, now want to move to Marilla. And they're moving developments out to Marilla, and they're moving developments out to Alden. Well, what happens when you keep on pushing development further out? You have more and more people moving further and further out, and then they want that 20-minute drive that they used to have, and you still have the roads that were designed for a rural community. So that's the problem that we're dealing with in Lancaster. It's a very similar problem we deal with in Hamburg, less in Hamburg than here. Clarence, if you know what Clarence was a rural community, and now it's McMansionville. And people want to be able to go from Clarence Hollow to downtown Buffalo in 25 minutes, and that's just impossible. Unless we've got some magic monorail or something. It's not going to happen with a car. But every time you move further and further out, you're adding to our infrastructure stress level, because now we have to continually feed, we have to find a way to feed the need to provide transportation as you go further and further out, which is not necessarily conducive to a county that already has 1,200 center line miles of roads and the population is barely growing. I'm glad the population is growing. It's the first time in decades it's growing. It is growing. But it's not like it's growing in leaps and bounds to cover the cost for doing all this new infrastructure. And William Street is kind of an example of what we're going to be facing in other communities if we can't address it. That one just happens to be so narrow. I have no interest in taking anybody's land. But as a result, we have to be able to design something that works. I don't know, I'm going to leave it up to them. They may come back and say, we can cover the ditches and it gets us a little bit. Maybe it's just two nicer lanes, but it still might be wall-to-wall traffic, just two nicer lanes. I don't know.
Turning lanes would be helpful.
Yes.
So that would cut down on the bottom line.
Minimum's 10 feet right now. But that, through the federal aid process, there'll be public forums like this where, through the data collection, through the findings, that's a very transparent process, but it does take some time.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Anthony Shimoni. I live on 3004 George Irvin, and I'm here tonight to ask the three of you gentlemen one question. I live on 3004 George Irvin for the last 54 years. There's a bridge by Our Lady Blessed Sacrament that I lost a ton of many trucks, trucking trailers that would just shred the top. Right? Just last week, the 29, one guy just took the whole top off, you know. And in the meantime, for an hour and a half, we got 4 or 5 police cars, 2 on one side and 2 on the other side, that they blocking the road. And the worst part was, there was a fire going on, and the officer, they had to direct the traffic, and they had, anyway, I'm just here to ask one question to Commissioner Gary, since I'm so impressed. First of all, I want to thank you for what you're doing for. I have a grandson who just finished a 5-year stint in the Marine. My son served 6 years in the military police. My other grandson served 3 years as a combat in the National Guard. So I thank you for wearing the uniform, and I also thank you. I never knew we had that much of a road in Erie County. So I'd say the last 54 years, I lived in George Irvin for 37 years at Cadet Grafton. So do you know the bridge that I'm talking about by Lake Sacrament?
Yes, sir.
How can we avoid for these trucks to go up that far? We too bad that this neighbor line is not here today yet at a medical procedure. But we have all kinds of correspondence that we have done in the last 15 years in regard to have a sign put on Transit Road. One between Walton and George Irvin, this is no left turn with the semi pictures. And one by French Road, there's an all right turn by the place. It's all, I'm asking you, for the last 54 years, I have talked to different police chief, different Erie County executive, and we'll go back to you, we'll come back to you and everything, but we have, like I said, unfortunately my friend is not here, but we have one city correspondent that we have done for the last 25 years, we'd be more than happy, we should be. So I'm asking the three of you gentlemen, before I leave, who do I call to we could have the residents of George Irvin, we could have a sign, 2 signs. One that says no left turn, one on the right turn. On George Irvin and Transit. Is that too much for ask? I know you know so much about bridges, about the road.
No, it's not a big ask.
do?
We'll take that up. Transit Road obviously is a New York State DOT road. I can't put signage on the road, but we can put advance notice. We've already worked this with DOT in the past. It's a railroad bridge you're talking about.
Yeah.
So the railroad bridge is the Federal Railroad Association. They don't respond. The road,
I don't care about the bridge, I don't want the bridge to knock them down.
No.
The day they knock down the bridge, I'm going to,
they're 100-year bridges. They won't touch a bridge for at least 100 years. That's how they.
I'm going to Scottsdale the day they knock the bridge down, because I know that I won't, the somebody's gonna be going night and days down there.
I know in the past, last year, this came up, was brought to us, and we discussed it with DOT. They reached out to TomTom and Google with the mappers, because a lot of these drivers are using the automated maps on their.
The last 15 years, that's all we hear about, the GPS, when the
Right.
drivers, they have a GPS.
Because that's what's driving them to the bridge.
But, so let's put a sign in there that says no left turn and no right turn, and we cut to the GPS, crap, excuse my language, I
No, I
can't
understand.
use that, okay?
Yeah, no, I'll talk to the
You know what
commissioner
I
tomorrow
mean?
with DOT.
Can I ask the three of you gentlemen to give me a phone number who we call? Who can we call?
Gentleman right
John,
there.
give him my-
Hi, how are you?
John, that's John Rivera, Special Assistant to the Commissioner for the Department of Public Works.
Thank you for having this meeting, thank you for hearing me out,
Yes, sir.
and
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I look
We'll,
forward
we'll
to your
respond.
reaction.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. We'll respond. And because we have to talk to the DOT because they control transit, and we'll determine what can be done on George Urban.
One side no left, and one side no right.
Yeah, no, we get it. We just don't control transit, so they're the only ones that can put the sign up saying no turn there.
I'll pay for the sign.
Dan Amateur, Town Lake Extra Highway Superintendent. A couple of questions and a couple of comments. First of all, your capital program you talked about, is that something you bond for, or is that something you budget for?
Both.
Both.
I was talking earlier with the,
We just approved yesterday the 2020 capital program for Erie County, which includes bonding, and we call it pay-as-you-go, which just goes in our budget, comes straight out of it, paid for by just general tax revenue. And it's I think we're doing about $20 million with the bonds, and then we're doing about $12 million worth of pay-as-you-go. And then the total amount is around, $45 million is scheduled for road and bridge work next year, of which, when I talk about that 20 and the 12, the remainder is being paid for by either federal or state resources, CHIPS, or federal reimbursement for some projects that we have. So it's large. I mean, we're talking $45 million next year. Last year, we did about $41.5 million this year. And it's the largest road program that the county has had since I've been in county government. I've been in county government since 2006 because I was a controller for 6 years. The county, as you may remember, went through the record fiscal crisis, and the Department of Public Works was decimated by staff. They were dramatically cut. Pretty much all the stuff that was the things that I said people wanted in government, the libraries, the parks, the public works, all that stuff, that was cut because the other mandated things couldn't be cut. So they decimated the Department of Public Works from a standpoint of staff, and we've added more labor positions, more motor equipment operator positions, and we're still not back to where we were before the regular fiscal crisis with regards to staff. But right now, we're spending more money than the county has on roads these last few years and next year than it had since I've been in county government dating back to 2006.
You just speak to the staff, you have, how many miles of road, many miles of road?
About 1,200.
And how many staff?
Including our engineering staff, 160.
I'm talking about on the road itself, maintaining roads.
A little less than 130.
Not enough.
No.
I can tell you that from my experience.
Yeah, it's about one person for every 11 to 12 miles of road.
But as I said earlier, I think you just were right again. We have an issue though, and I ask everybody, how many of you want your property taxes raised?
Then ask them how many people want their roads cleared. That's the other thing.
They do.
Okay.
They do. But if you ask them how many people want your taxes raised, almost nobody will say, I want to raise the property tax, even if it meant that it was going towards the roads.
I understand that. I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
so-
from my point of view, they do a great job with staffing.
Oh, they do. These guys do it, and women, there are women in the Department of Public Works staff. They do a great job, and I want to thank you and thank Supervisor Coleman because we just entered into a new snow plowing agreement between the county and the towns, the town supervisors and town highway superintendents, which will cover the next 3 years. So that 1,200 centerline miles of roads, we don't plow every mile, We rely on the towns and the villages and the cities and the couple cities that they do to do some of that plowing. And we plow, of course, a lot of miles of our roads, but I want to thank you and commend you for, we had a little bit of a negotiation, but I think we found a happy medium for all that worked, so that now we don't have to worry about snow plows, and if there's going to be snow plows out there, when the snow hits, the snow will be plowed.
Thank you. One more question. When you do these modeling, when we put subdivisions in the town, who does your modeling and traffic?
With subdivisions,
Yes.
we're not at the table when the subdivisions come in.
I know, but you do give it as an impact on traffic. We get a response from the county on that.
Yeah, so we have a traffic safety engineer, Gina Wigolowski, and the MPO has modeling software that we use down at GBNRTC, and they do simulations. They did a most recent